Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Identity Factor Podcast. My name is Robin Kiesler, and I will be your host. Let's go. Today, we have a very special guest with us. We're going to be speaking with Corinne Crabtree as we continue with our Shadow Side Leadership series, talking about leadership and mental health and kind of just destigmatizing what it means to experience mental and emotional health in our life on a daily basis, right? So many of us go through our experience of life and thinking that there are certain things where there's a certain point perhaps where you quote unquote arrive, right? And the reality is that there is no off ramp to the human experience. And this mental health journey, right? That's what it is. It's a journey. It's not a destination. It's not a place that you arrive to. It's a process of healing and learning about yourself and growing. And that's just something that you're always going to have. And I think so many people in the world today really have this limited and unfortunately painful experience and viewpoint of what it means to be mentally healthy or to be mentally fit. And for me, it doesn't mean that you never have a breakdown. It just means that you learn how to treat yourself more kindly, more graciously, more lovingly. And I love that Corinne has agreed to come in and talk about this with us because, as many of us know, Corinne Crabtree is one of the most powerful people in our industry. She is a powerful coach and leader. She is a weight loss coach and also a business coach. But what I love about Corinne is that her willingness to just come in and talk about her healing journey that she's taken so far, and also the healing that she's still experiencing. I love her willingness to come in and show up as a leader in our industry and in our world, and to be willing to share her heart and her story about what mental health really means and what it's meant to her. So thank you so much for doing that, Corinne. And for those of you that are listening, I just invite you to allow yourself to see your own story in what Corinne has to share with you here. I think so many people disqualify themselves and they say, oh, leadership, that's not for me. I'm not a leader. That's for someone else. And I just want to invite you as we go through this series to really allow yourself to take leadership off a pedestal for a minute and allow yourself to let go of the white coat syndrome and to examine where are the places in your life where you're being called to be a leader for your family, for your community, for your people, right? Because I believe that each and every one of us is really called into leadership. And what we're talking about today and through this series is a leadership of the heart that our world is desperately needing. So, Corinne, thank you for being here. Feel free to introduce yourself a little bit further if you would like to, and then we'll dive into this conversation on leadership and mental health and what that journey's been like for you.
Well, like she said, I'm Corinne Crabtree. I host the Losing 100 Pounds podcast. I was overweight most of my life and bullied. Like my dad, we were kind of estranged. And I remember, like, when I would go see him as a kid, like he would sing the Hefty Trash Bag commercial when he would first see me and stuff. So, weight for me was a very painful experience. It was always highlighted through my entire life that my body was a problem, my weight was a problem, the way I ate was a problem, and it separated me from people. So, I dealt with that most of my life. And then in my 30s, I figured out how I was going to lose my weight, and I wasn't going to do it through restriction. And now I teach people how to combine just some simple, like more, I would say, like intuitive based eating principles with a lot of mindset work. Because if you can't figure out what's going on between your ears, you'll never have any control over what's going on in your mouth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. When I started out on my weight loss journey, one of the things that I did not expect about it, which now seems silly, but of course I know intellectually that it's not, but I remember signing up for the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and I just needed help with my body. I was in total, panic attacks. I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I was a critical care flight paramedic working in a really hostile work environment. And I had just started, like, again, the binge eating was out of control, all the stuff, all the things. And I remember I was like, okay, but it had brought up all this when you talk about the bullying. Like, what I didn't realize is I had been keeping my life together, quote unquote, so well and like performing. And I was young, so I was able to like not get sleep and work the long hours and do all the stuff. But it kind of created this perfect storm when those emotional triggers started happening, and it brought up all the stuff that I didn't realize was unresolved: the bullying, the self-image, the identity stuff, like that I had never taken care of.
And so when I went to go get support for my weight loss, I lost 45 pounds through their program. And when we talk
Mm.
about intuitive eating, I had no idea. I was sitting there, would be like watching a video about broccoli, just like sobbing. Right? Because it was like all about, like, again, like it really showed me how this self-love was really at the core of all of this. And I loved how that's really what they did, was they rewired the relationship I had with myself. And all of it became
Yes.
about, it wasn't about losing weight anymore. It was about, is this a loving choice for me? Because I deserve to be treated well. And I had been just trashing myself. And
Yes.
like you said, between my ears and also my body.
Well, that was me. It was like, I often tell people, one of the things that people ask me all the time, especially when they hear that I've lost 100 pounds, the very first question they ask is, how did you lose it? And I always tell them there was no how. Like literally, I had to, like, what really helped me lose my weight was I changed how I talked to myself. Like, if there was any how, it was because at some point I had to decide I couldn't be a jerk to myself anymore. Like, that just had to stop. And so I got really good at what I teach a lot of people is noticing what I would call old Corinne thinking. Like, old Corinne beat herself up on the regular. Old Corinne would say, if I don't lose weight this week, then I should just go back to eating. And I started getting so good at listening for old Corinne. And instead of making myself wrong in those moments, I'd be like, no, new Corinne thinks this. I just got so good at figuring out what new Corinne needed to think, because it made sense to me that if I thought in a compassionate way, if I thought in a loving way, in a determined way or a willing way, then that would lead to being able to lose weight. It was so strange because I didn't read self-help books. Like, literally, I never had read a self-help book before I started my weight loss journey. I like, this was back in 2005 when I started. We didn't even have podcasts.
Yeah.
Like, that stuff wasn't even invented. It's like if I wanted to listen to something, I'd go get a book on cassette.
Yeah.
Like, so I just sit back and I think, I was so fortunate to be able to have it some level of awareness around what was always truly failing me. And it was what really failed me in all of the attempts I tried at losing weight was no one ever taught me how to talk to myself. No one ever taught me how to have a safe relationship with food. No one ever taught me what to do after a bad day. And no one ever taught me how to not feel guilty for stuff I should never feel guilty about.
Yeah.
Like, I often felt guilty around food. And I tell my clients all the time, what you eat is not a moral issue. Like guilt should not be like, that is a feeling that's been misplaced. And I need to teach you how not to have that anymore.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I feel you. It's definitely, the way that I like to think about weight loss is, there's a modern approach, and the modern approach to weight loss has, like, we're going to talk 75% of the time about what's going on inside your brain, and about 25% of the time we'll look at how you're eating and stuff. But
Yeah.
all of that, like, falls into line in a way that you want to eat and the relationship you want when you have that relationship you want with yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think that's, that's part of this whole idea about, for me, I've realized over and over and over again, it really does come back to this idea of identity and the way that I see myself, the way that I think about myself, the way that I talk to myself, the way that I treat myself. And I love the way that you describe that, because it's like old Corinne versus new Corinne. I hear you talk about that all the time. And and even the way that that ties in for your business, we can talk about that if we have a minute, but I really love this idea, because it's like, it's actually a huge part of what prompted me to want to do this month and host these discussions, because like I was telling you before we hopped on, my experience in Miami was actually very triggering for me.
Yeah.
I didn't expect it. There are times I have bandwidth and I can go into those types of places and be okay, but it really has everything to do with how did I treat myself that week before, or those few
Right.
days before. Like if I, go early and I have a few days, being a highly introverted person, and I'm a little weird and neurodivergent and all the other things, but it's like, to me, I just know there's something about having a quiet, calm place where I can like breathe and regulate my nervous system, right? Like that stuff matters to me huge. But it's like being able to realize and really embody that future version of myself is a really powerful thing to learn. And I don't think before I started with coaching, I even knew that that was a thing. I didn't even know you could have a relationship with your future self.
I didn't either. I'm going to tell you right now, that was all new to me too. We're just not taught that. Like, we're not taught. Just think about school and the way it's organized. Like, we study a lot of history. And I'm not saying like history is a bad thing. Like, we should study history, but our brains are trained that history is really important from a young age. Like, how often do we go to school and just talk about the future? Yeah. How many classes are about the future? They're just not, And so I just want all of us to know, like, that's, to me, it's like an adult skill we're going to learn. We're going to learn how to now transition from focusing on the past to focusing on what we want to create. And then we act from who we want to be. Yes. I always tell my people, I do think it's important to examine our past at times, but it's a skill to be able to go back into your past so that you can examine and dissect, pull out the pieces that you want, compassionately look at the pieces you may not want to bring with you to learn from them. What most of us do is we go to our past and we use it as the judge of who we are now, or we use it as a way to beat ourselves up. And so I tell people all the time, it's like, look, only go to your past if you know how to go to your past in a way that helps you. If you keep going to your past and it just becomes, basically a whipping stick for your life, don't go there. Now let's just learn how to go to the future more often. And most of the time, I just always think, like, I go to my past literally when I'm so stuck right now, like when I have been going to the future a lot and I've been thinking about who I want to be. If I notice it feels like I just can't get there, that's usually because there's something unresolved from my past. And that's when I'll go back.
Totally. Like for me, I was telling somebody this story the other day, was like that. So like, for example, again, when I was in Miami, it was interesting. Like I had been noticing myself having, binge eating again for several weeks in a row, which I haven't done in years. I mean, and I don't mean just emotional eating, I mean binge eating disorder. And like to the point where I will eat and be in such pain, but I can't stop. It's like a compulsion. And so my stomach will be huge and distended, and I'll be, laying in bed with like a heating pack, and just like, and it feels very out of control. It feels, not fun. But in this instance, it was interesting for me. There's a couple things that I think would be interesting to talk about, because in your podcast interview with Jen, you were talking about the identity collision. You're like, it wasn't an identity crisis, it was an identity collision, right? Yeah. When you talk about making money and stepping into now as an 8-figure earner, you talk all the time about growing up very poor, right? Much like probably many of us did. And when you grow up in poverty, that there's trauma there. It affects your nervous system, it affects your body, your identity, your belief system. There's so much. And so when you start growing now to where you are, I think there's a lot of people, I've heard people talk about, self-sabotage or imposter syndrome, but this experience, even for me on a smaller scale, it was like, whoa, like this is not, it felt very terrifying.
Yeah.
And it kind of triggered that. And I didn't realize until Miami that was what was happening. And it was interesting when I got back to my room after that weekend, and I just started to cry. I was like, what is happening? Like I was just and I was very aware of, there was this part of me inside that was like, I'm like, this isn't like me right now. This, 37-year-old version of me. I'm like, this feels like a little kid type of energy.
Yes.
When I checked in, totally, it was that 10-year-old girl, and it was like this past self, and I could feel it. It was strange. And I just asked her, I was like, okay, I'm going to have a conversation with her. And I was like, what's going on? I'm like, it's okay. If you need to cry, you can. And the words I heard she very clearly were, I do not belong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I recently did some of this work with my coach. We talk to little Corinne all the time. Like, I swear that I've been coached by the same coach for 4 years now, and we kind of just keep going deeper and deeper. And it almost every session now we go back and we talk to that. It's always the 12-year-old version of me. I don't know what was going on my 12-year-old year, but literally everything happened when I was 12, because every time we go back, she's like, how old is she? And I'm like, well, she's 12. She's back. Like, she's the one who represents, I guess for me, she probably represents the most of the hurt, and probably maybe has the best voice for all the different versions of me. But like with one of the things I think it's hard for people to think that I feel insecure often around, like the whole, like, I don't know. Do your listeners know about life coach school and like that whole?
Yeah.
Okay. So at the life coach school, I would be considered like the top earner. And so it feels like everyone knows me, and it feels like everyone loves me and stuff. And when I go, it's very overwhelming for me. And you would think that I would just relish in it. And I've been getting coached on it, because here recently, what I've noticed is I tend to say yes to everyone all the time. And um, it's kind of taking over my life. Like, if you don't have boundaries, if you can't say no, I am just a very determined person, and I have a huge capacity to work. I mean, when you grow up poor and you're working by the age of 12, like that 12-year-old, like, I mean, there's never been a moment in my life that I didn't work lots and lots of hours. Well, I'm getting older and it's really hard. And now that I have so much influence, everybody wants me to do things. And I worry about losing people, like, bad. And so I say yes to everything. So I was getting coached on this. And one of the things that I discovered was that I had to go back and talk to my 12-year-old self. And she offered me wisdom instead of me comforting her. And she was like, first of all, be grateful, because what I haven't been is grateful for all of it. I've been scared of all of it. And she's like, you're living the exact dream I always wanted. And then the second thing she told me was, you don't have to keep saying yes to everyone. She's like, you have earned now the right to say yes to you and the things that will matter. And we don't want just anyone in our life anymore. Like, she was literally talking about how, I don't want you to be a people pleaser. I didn't want everybody to like me. I wanted the right people to love me. Like my dad, just like, I'm sure he loved me, but I didn't know it at the time. And so she was just like really talking to me about like what I really want now. And it was so helpful, because I had all of this immense fear that if I started saying like, well, no, I can't do that, or, maybe next year, like this year's booked out or whatever, that people wouldn't love me. And she was like, first of all, people don't love you because of the time you give them. And if that's the only reason why they're loving you, then you haven't found the right people. You already have people in your life that will love you, whether a yes or a no. So it's just, I don't know, like when we talked about like going back to the past, and you were talking about your inner child, going back sometimes can be so useful if you're doing it in a way where it's like collaborative. And I think that's what I've most learned, is how to do that in a collaborative way, and healing a lot of those broken things that are going on for us.
Yeah, totally. Because that's one of the things that I notice a lot, is that specifically in the coaching industry, it's like there is more conversation about like future self, type of stuff, and the vision building and all, living from your future self. And I think even though for the general public, that's probably still a very foreign idea, I think within the coaching industry, that's more something that we think about or have awareness of. But it's like, for me, I'm like, and I hear people say that like, oh, I take my future self with me everywhere. But there was that moment where I realized, who else I take with me though? I also take that 10-year-old girl.
Yeah.
she's here too. And I'm not going to forget about her because I'm so hung up on this future self version of me. Because here's the thing, like, she belongs also. So how can I incorporate her? How can I make her a part of it? It's not about, like you said, Corinne, we're not going back in destructive ways or beating up on ourselves or ruminating about things. But for me, I have found it powerful to go back and to give her the love that she never had, or that she never felt, or that she always wanted. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's so interesting you said that, because out of this coaching session, one of the things that came up was, because I totally agree. Like, we do talk a lot, like in the coaching world, about the future self. There's like 3 of us always traveling the road. There's you today, who's just making the decisions, and you've got your future and your past self sitting there trying to guide you at all times. Like the past self, I think, is always afraid and trying to steer you. Like to me, my past self is always trying to keep me out of danger. And it's just like warning me of things and stuff. And the future self is like, here's the direction, here's who we want to be. And like, they're super aspirational usually. And what I found was that I have been like going to events and stuff, I've been leaving my past self out. She wants to be there. Like it was so incredible to just discover that 12-year-old version of me, she doesn't want me to leave her behind.
Exactly.
She's like, I want to experience all this. So my coach challenged me at, I've got 2 events coming up in June and July. I'm doing a business event in June and a weight loss event in July. And my picture's over there, so I can't go grab it, but I'm bringing my silver picture frame of little Corinne that one of my best friends gave me, Rachel Hart. She sent it to me because I was talking to her about how important little Corinne was to me, because she was the one that introduced me to the concept originally. And it said, would I ever say that to her? And so I'm bringing her on stage at my next 2 events, and I'm putting her right there so that, like, for me, and now this probably will get into so much woo as coaches, because only us coaches love this kind of stuff. Like, the regular public's like, what are y'all doing? But
journal I took to Miami, and guess what picture was in there?
Exactly. I'm telling you, us coaches love this crap.
I had her right there. Yep.
I am bringing her, and I'm going to put her up there. And I really feel like there will be some healing. Like, there will be this, this like clarity in this moment. Like, okay, now we're all here together. Future me, and past me. We're doing it together now. And we can listen to all of us. And maybe it will calm past self, little Corinne, down a little bit. Like, you're now included in all the decisions, and you're now listened to, and you get to come on for the fun parts. I mean, little Corinne didn't have much fun. Let's just be real honest. Little Corinne had a miserable little life. She wants to experience what we have now. And I think I've been shutting her out.
Hey, if you're enjoying this episode, I want to invite you to come join us on May 19th through the 21st for the Shadowside Leadership Summit. It's going to be an entire weekend where we're going to dive into these conversations around identity and leadership, around mental and emotional health, around how to support ourselves so that we can truly lead others in a more impactful way, that we also get to experience connection and joy along the journey. ShadowsideLeadershipSummit.com. Go sign up, and we'll see you.
That's how it was for me. It's like this little, and as that realization for me in Miami was just the beginning. And what was neat, Corinne, I've shared this story a couple times, was that, like, when I noticed her and how scared she was and that she was crying, I was very neutral. I was just like, it's okay, very type of, but I didn't feel like a super strong person in that moment. Like, but it was all good, but I was just very kind of neutral. But I felt it was a weird experience. I had, like, I don't want to say like a vision, but like, I felt like this energy of like my future self came barreling in that door. And she just kind of not like shoved me aside, but she was like, I got this.
That's awesome.
I just feel how, like, she was like powerful, just super, like this energy that I didn't have in that moment. And she just brought all of that power and that and she just wrapped that little kid up, and she was like, it's all good.
Yeah.
And it was really neat to kind of sense that and feel that. And I was like, I never considered that my future self could have a relationship with my past self. Like, I've done future self work, I've done past self work, but that was it wasn't planned, it wasn't conscious. I just sensed that kind of happen. And I was like, that was a neat experience. And what I realized is, even after Miami, it was like, and my stepdad was like, Robin, you're not done. He's like, because just notice, like, you can't just go back to work and forget about her.
Yeah.
Shoving her back in the closet. And so it's just been this. So I've been like, okay. And as I've been having these conversations, I've been noticing myself being like, oh, you're scared of like the visibility and all the things that are uncomfortable and people liking you. And just, I don't know, there's so much that's new, but it was neat when you talked about having fun. Something dawned on me recently where I was like, have I actually shared with her how much fun, like that not only is it safe, but like, sweetie, you get to play.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're going to get to go spend time in the woods and go do the things that you want to do, that you don't have to, like, there's benefit. It's worth it. Like, how much time have I spent to her talking about it being worth it. And just all of that has been a really neat experience. So
it's all important. Because like for me, as someone who felt very left out and excluded most of my life, you would think that the moment you're super included and everybody is like, I know you, like people, it's a little overwhelming when people come up to you and tell you like all the impact, like as if you're in their life all the time, at least it has been for me. But what scales with that is like, oh, well, now I have all these people that love me, but I never resolved the fear of not being loved. So now I just trade, like every single person that's doing that, it escalated my fear of losing people. Before I was afraid I wouldn't have people. And I think that's why it's really important for all of us to really examine our thinking. Like, this is why we need coaching. This is why we need to look at all this stuff, because, like you were asking me about money. It's like, yeah, money's great. I'm not going to lie to anybody. Having it for the first time in my life is amazing. And it also comes with worrying I'm going to lose it. It also comes with worrying I might not be able to take care of all my employees. It's not like, I always like to say, just because you get what you always thought was going to make you happy, it doesn't absolve you from any negative emotion. It's just usually going to come up in a new way. And we want to face it and stuff. But I think I've just gotten really good at, over the years, not being afraid of my negative emotions anymore. Like really understanding them. As one of my favorite books I ever read, I can't remember the name of the book. It may have come from the Food and Feelings workbook. I'm sure it was a weight loss book that I read at some point while I was researching stuff. But it was the Food and Feelings workbook. She talked about how, like, this thought, our feelings are like the dashboard on our car. So like when you have boredom or anger or hopelessness or whatever, disappointment, they're just an indicator light that something's happening. It doesn't mean they're bad. It doesn't mean it's all true. It's like, it doesn't mean anything like that. It's like, if we can start thinking about all of these emotions that come up for us around what seems like we finally have exactly what it is we want, it is that indicator light going off that, hey, I'm interpreting this somehow in a dangerous way. And this is where I think it is really good, like in those moments, to go back to the past, because it's probably unresolved trauma somewhere in the past that needs to be, looked at, talked about. I do a lot of, I'm like you, I do a lot of that little kid work. It's always a little kid, and it's that version of us that somehow didn't have this or is worried we will lose this, who's just like, I need your reassurance. I'm sending up right now fear and anxiety and disappointment, whatever it is. I'm just trying to get your attention because I don't know any other way to get it.
Yes. I love actually the way that Esther Hicks talks about that, or Abraham, because the way that they say it is like that these emotions are your emotional guidance system, right? It's your emotional guidance system.
Yes.
And it's like, whenever you're feeling those emotions, it's an indicator that to me, it's an indicator that I'm forgetting the truth of who I really am. I'm forgetting the truth of who I really am. And so it's like, what's the lie that I'm believing about myself right now?
Yes.
I'm not trusting? What's the thing that I'm forgetting? Because when I'm living from my true self, truly, like my wholeness and my that essence of who I am, you don't have those things, right? When someone tells you that they love you and that you're beautiful and amazing and you believe it, and your partner or your grandparent or whatever, and it's like, why does it feel so good? I think it feels so good because they're mirroring back to you the truth of who you really are.
Right.
If it tells you you're a piece of shit and that you're worthless and you have no space in the world place here, then it's like it feels horrible. Why? Because it's not in alignment with the truth of who you really are.
Yeah.
And so I think, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna agree with you. I just think it's beautifully said. It's like, I like a lot of times when people tell me things, and I always describe it as sometimes I feel like a wall comes up, like immediately, like it's like my body throws up a wall of like, ooh, I don't know about that one. I always try to note whatever it is that's super uncomfortable for me in that moment. Like I've gotten so good at noticing how it literally feels like from my stomach to my neck, a wall comes up as if I've got to protect the most vital parts of you. Because whatever's being said to you right now, you don't believe it. Like your inner critic is like, that's not true. That's not true. So it just kind of shuts out what I'm hearing. So I don't have to deal with it. And I try to always note it. And I don't try to, like a lot of times I think as coaches, we're always so busy trying to unwind things in the moment. And especially our clients, we don't have the capacity in the moment. And even if you did, if you're sitting there talking to someone and be like, excuse me, I have an emotional wall building. I'm going to need to go over here and examine myself. Like usually what I try to do is just put a pin in it, like when you are in the quiet and your nervous system is very regulated and you can really think and use both logic and emotion at the same time, let's work on that stuff then. Because that's when you're most open to all of the change. Trying to do it like on the fly, most of the time, I've just realized most of my thought work is very ineffective on the fly.
Yeah.
I just tell myself, I often feel this way and I can keep going. And I often think these things and I can keep going just so I can stay, making forward progress, functional in my life and stuff. But I never neglect the work though.
Yeah.
Like I don't just like say, and you can keep going and never examine it. I'm like, and you can keep going. And at some point I'm going to examine it. So I don't have to do that part anymore.
You don't want to dismiss those parts of you. They're important. And I think that's where we make the mistake, where it's like, let's just keep going. Oh, it's just a thought. Let's just go. And I'm like, I refuse to bulldoze over that little kid inside that's afraid. I'm not in the driver's seat. She doesn't need to be, but I'm not just going to bulldoze over her and just like positive thinking my way out of this, because there's something here that's wanting to be, like you said, nurtured and healed.
Yes.
So let's bring this back really quick before we have to hop off to this idea of leadership and mental health. And so when we look at these parts of ourselves that are, I would call them the shadow sides, right? The parts of ourselves that we would rather the world not see, the parts of ourselves that we kind of want to hide or feel ashamed of. Like, what are those parts for you, Corinne? And how has your journey through loving those parts helped you to become a better leader?
Well, I think probably the one thing, like this is a newer thing that came up for me is I've had two really successful, I've had a lot of success, but the last 2 years have been the kind of monetary success that like it's just, I call it astronomical to me. Like I just never thought, but a lot of shame with money came with it. Like I would say I've had a lot of like I still haven't even shown my clients my house. Like I have always been a behind the scenes kind of girl. And my house is so fucking nice. Even right now, we're building out a basement. I don't know if you can hear the hammering, but beneath me is a 3,000 square foot basement being built of studios and meeting space, like just incredible, just stuff is happening for me because of money now. But man, I have so much shame about it. It's like, I don't want anybody to know. And that's probably that for me with leadership, I have been trying to unwind because I think for women, well, I think for anyone that grew up poor, honestly, but especially like when you think about women, we just aren't taught number one, how to think about money. We're taught that we're bad at money. We're taught so many terrible things about money. And then when you have a lot of it, you feel incapable of dealing with it. You feel bad at it. You feel like you can lose it. Anybody can take it, like all these things. And that's been really hard for me.
Yeah.
And I also don't want to be seen as some kind of like money grubbing butthole.
Right.
It's just like, I have a lot of money now, but there's a part of me that's just like, but you're going to look like you're just in it for the money. And I've been trying to like work on thoughts around it. And like, for me, one of the truest thoughts is you have a lot of money because you've never been in it for the money. Now it's just inescapable to make money because you've given your heart and soul for so many years. I mean, anybody who knows my background in just business, number one, I didn't go to college, and even if I had gone, it doesn't like they have like entrepreneur in a box. I mean, it's just like it doesn't exist. But for the first 10 years of my business, I worked probably 60 to 80 hours a week because I was so in love with my clients and I made no money. Like I never made more than $30,000 a year. That was barely enough. By the time I paid taxes and stuff, that was enough to cover workout tights, gym memberships and trainers. Like, because I just spent it on like my hobbies. And so I've been reminding myself, I've never been in it for the money. I've always been in it to change people's lives. And at some point, I've been working at it so hard that money is just now coming. And so but it's tough. Like, you like those darker sides of you or the shadow side is, I think it's just always there. It's like when you extinguish one, another one comes up. It's like, or the one that couldn't have a voice in the room. It's like think of it as like a big room of shadows. And one of them is looming right now. And so that's the one that gets the energy and the focus and all the attention and stuff. And you finally shine a light and you resolve it. Well, the next shadow just comes up like, my turn.
Totally. And I think
it's
that's
okay.
I think that's the part, like when we talk about mental health, like that's so powerful, is to notice that like that this is a part of it, that this doesn't necessarily go away. And I love like thinking about this, like for you, that shadow that you feel yourself experiencing in this massive life of yours is shame. So
Yeah.
interesting, right? And like to consider like, how is this shame actually serving me
Yeah.
in my business as a leader for my clients?
Well, go ahead. Ask me your question.
I'd say, do you feel like there's something there?
Yeah. Like I think well, number one, I think one of the reasons why so many people, I guess, like follow me and whatnot is because I do work on myself so much and I share that work so much. I don't always share it immediately, like with the shame around my money. I'm sharing it in my business side, but I haven't yet done enough work to feel comfortable sharing it in my weight loss side, which a lot of my weight loss clients are going to hear me talk about this on all these 60 podcasts I've done. It's not the first time this has come up. So I pretty much have let the tiger out of the cage on this one. But I always, when I'm working on myself, I'm always trying to think, how can I teach my clients how to go through this too? Because I know, number one, we are all the same. At the end of the day, we're all just humans working through the same freaking problems. And so I'm always looking for ways that like, what thoughts change for me? What's my personal story about this? When I start getting that little bit of wiggle room out of it, I like to immediately start teaching it and sharing it. I haven't figured it out yet on the shame around my house, but I'm real close. I know it all is rooted in, I would never want, like my business clients, my thought is, well, of course I'm making money. They're trying to build a business too. They get it. My weight loss clients will never understand. That's been my big thought. And I'm working on all of that, And the same thing happens for them, like with weight loss. Like a lot of times they don't want to share their weight loss with their loved ones or whatever, because they feel like they're leaving a partner behind or a friend behind. And so then they have shame around their success. Because that's really what ends up happening is success shame. and how, like, what we think it's going to do to someone else if we shine. And it's important to work through it. Otherwise, you will pump the brakes on your success. If success equals harming people you care about, you'll never go after success because nobody wants to harm the people they care about.
And then you're harming yourself and the people you care about because you're not allowing yourself to be the example of what's truly possible and to fulfill your place in this world. And I think for me, when, tying that shame, that success shame back, it reminds me of my weight loss journey because I experienced that there too.
Mhm.
And one of the most powerful questions I was ever asked around that was so helpful for me was when this integrative nutrition doctor said to me, she said, every choice you make is nurturing something.
Oh, wow.
Every choice you make is nurturing something. And so it's so easy for people to shame and disregard, again, the shadow, whether it's shame, whether it's that McDonald's burger that you wish nobody would want, you don't want anyone to see you eating, or whatever it is, the cigarettes you're smoking, behind the hospital or whatever. But she's like, every choice you're making is nurturing something. And until you allow yourself to explore, how is this serving me? What is this shame nurturing? What is this limiting belief nurturing?
Yeah.
That's when you uncover that. Now you have the ability to begin to say, thank you for your service. You can step aside because I have another way of meeting that need.
Yeah, I love that. I really love that. That's one thing that I always say that I say it similarly, but I like the way you're saying it is everything that we would consider to be like on the negative experience of thinking or feeling always has a good intention. Like I just like for me, that has helped me at the very end of the day make peace with all the parts of me that come up. It's like everything is well intended. It's just some of them sound like a jerk.
Yeah.
you know. So we just need to figure out what is the good intention behind this, and like you said, like how can we do this in a new way
Totally.
so that the intention can be met.
Yes, 100%. Corinne, thank you so much for being here with us today. Please let people know how they can find you or what you're up to if they want to know.
Yeah. If they're interested in the weight loss, they can go to nobsfreecourse.com. And I always suggest people to take the free course first because it gives you a real look into how I teach, because it's a very different method of weight loss than what most of us have been experiencing. Then if you're an online coach, you can go on over to nobsbusinesswomen.com and you can check out everything that we're doing over there to help women start, grow, and scale their own online businesses.
Heck yeah, I love it. And check out what she's doing in Nashville because OMG, that's amazing. I hope you have the most amazing time there. Corinne, thank you for being here. This was a blast. We all love you so much.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, take a screenshot of it for me and share it on your favorite social media platform. And in the meantime, I just want to invite you to remember that you are beautiful, that you are worthy, that you belong. See you next time.